Thank you so much for joining today. We have Cortnie Abercrombie here, and I am a big admirer of yours and follow you around on LinkedIn and see what you're doing in terms of AI. But we are in a conversation with Digital Ethics, Digital Center of Excellence for Digital Ethics at Dallas Baptist University, and we're interviewing a bunch of people in the industry and gather their thoughts about what really is ethics in the digital space, where is the battle taking place, and what are the kinds of dialogues that we have to have. So first of all, Cortnie, for this benefit of our audience that really need to know some of your amazing talent and background, would you share a little bit?
Oh my goodness. Well, probably my biggest claim to fame was that I helped IBM launch a huge chief data officer community back before chief data officers were really a thing, and kind of helped. I treated that role and launching it in the marketplace almost as if it was a product itself. Just trying to help them create job descriptions, working with executive recruitment firms to get chief data officers placed so that there would be leaders in charge of data, because we as IBM weren't getting very far with all of the multiple leads of data and analytics in the workplace. We had to have one person that could oversee all of it so that it could actually come to fruition. A lot of the things that people want to do digitally are completely and utterly controlled with data, or they're dependent upon data, not controlled with data, but dependent upon data. And then I moved into what could only be described as kind of like a Shark Tank, the TV show from Shark Tank, a Shark Tank version of AI incubation for solutions. So I changed into a different role where I was flying all over the country and I was meeting with the clients of IBM, and we were talking with all the everybody from the junior data scientist and what they were doing on the team on up to the CEOs and the chief digital officers or the HR folks or the operations folks. AI is in everything, in every part of every business. And it's actually even in every part of our lives. Yes. People don't often think about AI as being a watch. Most of the time when you think AI, you think robots. People always say, oh, I see you're building robots. And I say, no, AI can be in all kinds of things. Yes, they can definitely be in robots, but
people don't know that it has been for a while. Right?
Yes.
Just now it's coming to the surface as a profession, and it's much more available, but it's been in the works for many years in various flavors, from machine learning to full-fledged AI.
Absolutely.
Something we'll touch on today. So, Cortnie, some of the main things that people need to know about AI. Our audience is composed of a wide range of individuals, professionals from various industries, not all in tech, and also we have our students listening. So what should there be in their understanding of AI that is important?
The main thing, and it's for everyone as just human beings who live on the earth and have AI impacting us every single day. I say there's two basic, and these are very high level, two basic things that you should be concerned about that maybe you didn't know to be concerned about. And that's your actual physical safety, because AI is making a foray into all kinds of things that can affect us, literally physiologically harm us, like harm myself. And those things are things like self-driving cars, robot-assisted surgeries. We've heard a lot about robot-assisted surgeries in the use for cancer and cancer detection as well. Health diagnostic apps. I think we've all seen the use of COVID contact tracing using machine learning capabilities and other things. Definitely things like autonomous weapons in the government sector. Even, maybe you wouldn't classify this as a safety or could it cause physical harm to me, but I actually classify social media right there as well, because of the level of involvement that people become with some of the deep fakes that go on.
Oh my goodness, that is so dangerous.
You could be lured in. Let's say a group decides they want to target you, and they put an ad, and this is completely hypothetical, I'm not mentioning any specific cases, but they put an ad on Facebook, and it's to target a specific group. let's say that specific group, then they've become targeted with this fake video that shows maybe somebody that they admire being beaten upon or something violent. That's something that stirs a deep, deep emotion in us. And when those deep emotions occur, we are moved to action usually. And people know that. And there's nothing like seeing a video of a child something's being done that's we don't want to deal with, or to make us move to action. And so when people could actually show up to a place thinking that they're showing up to support an effort to go against whatever that violence was or what have you, but they've been targeted, they could actually incur physical harm when they show up to a location where maybe it's an ambush. Yes. Or in the case of teenage bullying, I mean, if we think about what goes on with social media, and I include the YouTube videos and the manipulations of children, even to think that their parents or significant others could be harmed if they don't carry out these malicious acts.
It's pervasive.
It's horrible. So I actually consider social media to be right there in the physical safety front as well. Mm-hmm. But those are the kinds of things that AI are in that I don't think people are aware of. Is AI recommending that next YouTube video that happens to be the Momo challenge? Yeah, it is. I mean, granted, because of now it has become a big thing. Yes, YouTube has gone back and looked at, how did that happen? And of course, they're going to try to stay on top of it. But sadly, until things often have laws against them, or until something horrific already happens, yes, we don't know. And so we all just have to be very vigilant about the AI that is all around us. Yeah. And that's part of what my mission with AI Truth, my nonprofit, is to try and make people aware of what they didn't know. Yeah. And how their data can actually be used against them.
Now, what I'm finding is that we have right now we're talking about AI to several generations, and yes, all with a different focus and a different understanding. So for those of us who knew the world without AI, and for those who are starting
without internet,
AI,
without even
internet for sure, and then those who already have grown up with AI practically, and their understanding of what is normal and not normal, and good and bad. How do you see individuals getting involved and having the time, keeping the attention, and having the interest in having a say in how AI is rolled out? So not to the extent of, and people, when they hear that, they think, well, are you stopping innovation? No, just purposeful innovation, quantifiable, measurable, proportionate, innovation that really has a benefit and that also can be transparent. We can dissect it and see what is working and not working, and have an open dialogue about perfecting that if needed.
And you're actually hitting on some really good points that I'm going to talk about at the end of this, which is what can you do? Because there's certain underpinnings to AI that have to occur that are not occurring today, mm-hmm, for us to get to a level of having trusted AI. What I mean by trusted AI is AI that everybody can feel like, hey, I can use this and it's not going to send me a Momo challenge, or it's not going to send me to some, Uber driver that's going to drive me out in the middle of nowhere, or it's not going to, or it's not going to charge me the wrong prices, or, yes, do something finagly or something like that, and I think the way that we have to get there, we have to have a cultural revolution within machine learning and AI, quite frankly. And I'm going to be writing a really big paper for this for the new Springer AI and Ethics Journal. But essentially, if we keep the way we are, move fast and break things, profit first, only profit. If we can't justify the revenue, then we can't justify the project. If we keep using those measures as the measures that we hold ourselves accountable to, and hey, we're talking to business people here, so every business person in the back of their head is thinking, I've got a fiduciary responsibility. Mm-hmm. And what does fiduciary responsibility mean? It means money. I got a responsibility to make sure that shareholders have money. But at the end of the day, when it comes to AI, the use of it is so ubiquitous and the extent of it is so prolific at this point because of the use of it. We can't afford to continue thinking that if we just look at profits and time frames and the next quarterly numbers, that we're not going to do everybody in at the end of the day. At some point, and this is what I mean when I say there has to be a culture shift, because data scientists and machine learning engineers and even risk people, they're trying to always look at a set of things, and they're weighing them constantly.
Yes.
And the one is the one that's always coming out higher in the past is money.
Yeah, there's a pattern of that for sure.
Yes, and I think the thing that we won't see, and reputation, you would argue, marketing people would say, well, reputation is pretty high up there too. And yes, that's true, but your reputation doesn't get affected by AI as much because there's no transparency. Nobody even knows that they've been done wrong. And so what you'll find though is, and I remember talking about this when we first met, which, you know, I feel like we've known each other forever, but I think this was like less than a year ago actually, but this idea that your rights will just become strangled off from you and you won't know it until you're sitting there, just like air in a room. You can't see the air, but if you were in a room where it steadily, your oxygen just kept getting lower and lower, you just wouldn't be able to breathe eventually. And I think the rights that AI can impose on us, you know, are going to become a lot like social scoring in China, quite frankly.
Yes, boys, they're that's a topic by itself.
Because we're nudging. There's a constant thought that there is so much information in the world at all times that we are constantly being nudged into things that machine learning is trying to read you, Paola, and say, these are the things we think Paola's going to be interested in. And then it picks 5 out of those 1,000 things that Paola normally would have had to sift through on her own and make a decision about whether to read or not read in the news, whether to shop for or not shop for in Google, whether to, you know, whatever it is. But there's always a nudge that's happening. And product designers are... So if you're going into that profession as students, you know, think deeply, think very, very deeply about how you design things, because that very much affects the decisions that people are making in their lives every day. And using AI to do that, we've already seen that we've become more polarized. I'm giving you an example of what I'm talking about. So in the news, if we constantly see only the things that we want to see, or that a machine learning algorithm thinks that we want to see. If we're always only served up, I don't know, let's say I'm a Lucky Charms fan and I only see Lucky Charms, I may never know about the greatness of Cocoa Puffs. I'm trying to keep from being political, right. But the Cocoa Puffs could be really great. Right. Count Chocula, for crying out loud, the best cereal ever, you know. But, you know, there will always be Captain Crunch detractors. Yes. But if I never know about these things, then I will never be exposed to them. It's like your vegetables on your plate, right? Eventually you become a grown-up and you want to see all the vegetables.
And you actually have that in reality. People say, I've never eaten that, so it's not good for me. I don't understand it. But it's the predictive aspect combined with the absence of choices afterwards is probably the one that is of most concern to our center. So we can describe a person, fair enough, but when we start predicting their behavior based on AI, and then when we start limiting their choices, because, and not just in advertising, other choices, informational, decision-making choices, political, then that
religious.
That's right. So now we've entered into a path that is of just sheer manipulation. And that is at the heart of what I see. There's an absence of conversation there, perhaps because of lack of knowledge from consumers. And you definitely have seen a ton of that, and you know that terrain well.
Yeah, there's no, you know, it's the more that we're getting into more digital every day, the more we become digital tribes, right? So we're becoming less connected in the real world. You could argue, some could argue. but we're becoming more connected to these tribes in the digital world. But the digital tribes are very into themselves.
Yes.
And they only see what each other forwards around. And they only ever see that same point of view over and over. And they never really have that different point of view that they can see from over here, from this tribe. And unfortunately, that's causing there to be no middle ground. And there's no purveyors of the middle ground. There's no middle ground tribe, so to say, anymore. Because you can't have a middle ground tribe because it will become its own tribe. So, we have to figure out ways to deal with this digital society that we're in and how to create these opportunities through products and showing people, hey, there's more than just what you've got in front of you. Or if you want to redefine, let's say you happen chance met a person from another tribe in the real world, for heaven's sake. There's got to be, and he or she exposes you to this whole other tribe, a way of thinking, and suddenly you want to jump tribes,
But you're a traitor to your own.
I know it sounds funny, but when we start talking about the things that matter in our lives, politics, our professions, religion, everything that uniquely defines us as ourselves, that's not food, water, drink, that doesn't define us, that's just things that we have to stay alive with, but those kinds of things are the things that define us. And if we can never get out of just these little bubbles that are everywhere, we'll never be able to really help each other meet in the middle ever. And we'll continue with this path of polarization, I fear, and on all fronts, not just right now. The one that we see the most, of course, because elections are coming, is the political sphere and how polarizing that is. But soon we will see even more of that on a lot of different fronts, with people defining themselves.
The digital tribes, I think you hit on something super important in my opinion, because they didn't just happen. I think that you can find traces of actual orchestration of the creation of those tribes by entities that had something to profit from that, and keeping us separated without that dialogue or without even the tools for that exchange. So we may want to cross tribes, but how do we do it? And do we even have the time or the attention that we can hold, because we have saturated our lane with so much to do, that to cross over takes so much reading, so much understanding, so much patience that contradicts the very way in which we have been digitized. And we're running on a lot of moment by moment as opposed to some deep thinking. But yet there are ways, and we have to aim for that. So any suggestions on how that crossover can happen as a staple, as part of the diet, so that you can gain further understanding of others?
Well, there's lots of answers for the tribes, for the rights and liberties, because coming back to the safety and the rights and liberties part are being defined by tribes, whether we like it or not. We don't want it. We don't want algorithms and machine learning defining tribes for us, but we do. It happens all the time. It happens, literally all the time. If you're on any social media of any kind, you're already having things defined for you, and they're being shoved up in your face, whether you're reading LinkedIn and having articles come forward, or you're on Medium, which is supposed to be, articles as well. And people don't have the ability, the access to change what this algorithm considers them. We all have these informal, unknown about labels. And these labels are being bartered and sold in the cloud, and then you're being lumped with other people. I don't know how many of you got to see, because we have a room full here with Paola and I, for everyone in the virtual audience, but we there was this documentary called The Great Hack, and people were labeled persuadable in that, and it was about politics, and I don't want to get into the actual politics part, but the fact that you could be labeled without even knowing it and then targeted for specific either information or misinformation, depending, is kind of a scary thought, that someone could manipulate your right of your own vote, and in a false way. I mean, to receive something that you think, oh, well, this must be true. It's a video, it's a picture, it's something that I used to be able to rely on, and then see a behavior that I would have thought unbecoming to somebody would make me want to vote a different way. Mm-hmm. But then you find out, oh, that wasn't true at all. It was just these deep fake things. That is literally stealing your right to vote. The way that you would normally vote if you were able to think about these things not from a deeply emotional stance of seeing something that you think is true, but being lied to and manipulated into voting a particular way. Now that's scary to me. And I'll take this example. So in product design terms, there are a lot of people who are graduating who they've never been exposed to what it's like to be poor. I grew up very poor, so I can tell you there's a lot of cash involved in being poor. In this particular case, and this isn't necessarily an algorithm, but it's thinking through. It's taking time to think through the implications of getting rid of cash systems, for example. Right. Like Starbucks had eliminated the ability to pay in cash because the data scientists were like, I don't think we really even need that ability, and it costs extra, and it's a liability to carry cash and all of this kind of stuff. Well, then lo and behold, it turns out everybody loves a good Starbucks. Construction workers who just have cash on them from whatever they just received, or day workers of all kinds, or just someone who wants to protect their privacy, for crying out loud, just often has cash. And these guys were thinking, well, why would you ever need to live without a credit card? And what would you ever do with that? And so Starbucks kind of learned the hard way. It's actually discriminatory to do away with cash. Yeah. Now I can, as a group, no longer participate in your store or buying things, from you. And I only bring that up because it's an example of how we can lose something that we had before, just because of a bad, not thinking it all the way through in a design aspect.
Which if we come back to the concept of tribes, they might have thought it all the way through, but within the lane.
Yeah, so but only within their lane. Oh, right, because a lot of them from Stanford and Berkeley, and those guys usually have money. They have access to means. They're not necessarily having to deal on cash every day. So you're right. Within their tribe, they thought it through, and that's what they came up with. And that's why it's more important for us to mingle tribes as much as we can. Have as many different kinds of minglings as we can. Mm-hmm. I mean, from every way. I mean, get as many different cultures, as many socioeconomic portions. You have to get so many different perspectives in systems that are going to affect everybody out there. I mean, it's easy to think from just your tribe, but it's a lot harder to, and it does cause more conflict when you have to bring multiple tribes together.
For sure, yes.
But it's always a stronger, there's been studies done on diversity and inclusion, and it's not enough even, and there are people who say, but I am the diverse person in the group, and I just don't feel like I can speak up. And I'm like, well, you better find a way. Speak up, and then tell the other people that's why you're there, is to bring your voice to the table. And yes, it's going to be different, and people don't want. How many times have you been the woman in the room with a whole bunch of guys?
Too many times.
I can't tell you how many times I've watched the single lone Indian developer sitting in the room with a whole lot of white people trying to explain this is what I'm trying to say to you, and they're very quiet and demure about it. And I think, no, if you want to get these guys' attention, you're going to have to make them hear it. If you are the diverse person, whatever that is for you. I mean, maybe you're the poor person in the room, maybe you're the rich person in the room. I don't know what you are. Maybe you're the religious person in the room. That's hard to talk about.
Absolutely. I find that the rural voice voice, for instance, is not being as heard in the urban development. And the rural voice is being adopted, but it really just doesn't come in with the weight that it needs to, because it just doesn't find the right channels to be heard. As a consumer, as a citizen, as whether you are in the agriculture or in the ranching, etc., the conduits are not there.
And yet 50% of America is in rural areas, right? Isn't that right? Yeah.
So when 5G, for instance, gets rolled out, or it is being rolled out, but when it continues to get rolled out, those voices are not necessarily heard in the same manner in terms of need and proportion of the rollout. But that's a separate dialogue. The circling back to liberty, which is such an important topic, digital ethics and liberty, and coming back to another comment of yours of leaving folks out, which in my mind comes back to disenfranchising portions of the population, again, voices, but now more pervasively because of the grid. So the grid as a whole, not just infrastructure, but the social grid and anything digital, being in or being out is no longer that much of a choice if you wish to live and interact with cities. But we don't have everybody connected necessarily. So we found that out over the last 3 months, that there were people that did not have internet at home. Right. And why? Maybe they didn't want to. So why do we need to force them? But if they don't, then we're also not hearing what they have to say on the matters. And that also covers folks that are very, very old or very, very young. And especially the very, very old with wisdom and with experience of having been in this country for so long, having been born here, they have something to say. They remember history. They've seen patterns of behavior, but we're not necessarily hearing them when it comes to forming and continuing to shape the digital space. Yeah. So what would you say in the liberty aspect is the most threatened area right now, in the liberty arena?
Well, I tend to think more about, I've been looking at the AARP and all of the things that they're trying to do. They're actually trying to be very forward with these newer technologies to help keep people in touch with family, because being lonely, it's not just a person who's over 50 problem. That's a problem for everybody, I think, right now, being isolated in their homes. But it's an interesting concept to think that if you decided that you didn't want to be subject to manipulations on Facebook, for example, they just can't weed them all out for you, and you decided you don't want to be on there, it's almost like opting out of your grandkids' lives, right? In some ways, because how else are you going to learn about them? They're not usually gonna, I don't know of any teenagers that are going to pick up the phone and willingly call grandma and grandpa and tell them what's going on. So a lot of, voyeuristic grandparentism is going on. That's made up, but that's not a thing. Don't quote that. But that's what they do. They're watching for all the proud moments, and they say, "Oh, that's our genetics right there," But it's almost like opting out of a lifeline for some people to not have access, like you say, to some of these technologies that enable us all to come together. Mm-hmm. And I don't know of a real good answer for, how we keep that going, other than to make the things that we have better. So the things that connect us, and I'll go to my. Absolutely. I am a whiteboard. I am a whiteboard drawer, and this is very hard for me to come prepared with a pre-written whiteboard thing. But since this is not the forum, so our safety and our rights and liberties, the things that I was talking about, there's an underpinning that AI actually needs. We have some of these things, but we don't have them all. We could do better on data privacy. Yes. Certainly Europe has done a really great job. Mm-hmm. We need consent. Can't explain it, you don't have transparency. There's no feedback loops to give a person control over their own data, or even whether it was right or wrong, what they assumed about me was right or wrong, that I actually don't even live in this neighborhood anymore, that they decided was a horrible neighborhood and they will no longer service it, with groceries or whatever the case is. There has to be a rectification. I can't rectify any of these things as a company, as an individual, as a nation, even if I don't have these other things first. So the first thing we have to do to get our safety and our rights and liberties back is these things right here.
Yeah, I think you're so spot on. Let me ask you a couple
You
of
need
questions.
you need my sheets?
We will
just go around.
promote it. The explainability factor is fundamental, right?
Yes.
So talk to me about, have you heard recent litigation where they have honed in on explainability? And are there changes happening there that can catapult the changes in accountability and potentially rectification?
The explainability, I don't know of any. You seem like you might know of one specifically.
I wish. I'm searching for
No, I don't know of any currently that have gone through. There are a lot of things that have been introduced. I don't think that our congressmen know quite enough yet to demand a lot of these things that are on this paper, which also, AI Truth, I'm hoping is going to help with a lot of the understanding from government officials and lawmakers. But explainability is very different than just having transparency. If I put out something that tells me, hey, you got denied for this education, and this education loan, and it was because your grandma is of some kind of heritage. Well, that's not really a good explanation. Why would that matter?
Yes.
Why would that matter?
What's the decision-making process associated to the algorithm that allows me to go back and say, well, your decision-making process is wrong in automation, which is something that GDPR calls out loudly. And we don't have that in the privacy laws in this country.
No, not yet. I'm hoping we will, but I have not seen any real gains towards that yet. I see that we're trying to make people give consent. I saw in the case of HireVue and the other AI interview and assessment companies, because there's more than just HireVue, but that they're trying to make them explain their assessments, and they can't. And data scientists, some machine learning data scientists will even say, but I'm right, or it's right most of the time, so if I have to simplify it in order for me to be able to explain it, then, would you rather have the explanation, or would you rather have something that's more correct? And their logic behind that, and that's why there's a big pushback actually from the machine learning community, from some people in the machine learning community, that we don't want to explain, because if we explain, it defeats the point. And I'll say, let's say you have 50,000 data points. You and I will never be able to read all those data points in a lifetime. But the AI, that's the whole point of it, right? It's supposed to read all of that stuff in, and then it's supposed to, based on what I've trained it on, it's supposed to spit out results.
Yes.
They can't always understand what it clued in on, because it's learning on its own. What we can do is go back and audit the training data. So what we're saying is, if we have an algorithm, for example, that's clustering, which is it's learning on its own, that's unsupervised learning. It's picking out aspects. It's trying to figure out what's the difference between this pillow and this piece of paper. And it will probably come up with some color variation. It will probably be fed some texture type of things, some texture data. But at the end of the day, how it came up with the pillow versus the paper on like the 50,000th run of the algorithm, we probably won't know what actually made it decide that. It could have just decided that most pillows were blue, so therefore pillows are blue. And then we would never know unless we ran a blue piece of paper against it. And I think that's where we're seeing a lot of the bias situations that are coming out today, is there have been a lot of and I don't know if you saw the recent New York Times article with the man that was wrongfully convicted via
Yes,
facial
I did.
recognition
Oh, my
technology.
goodness. Yes.
And it's because, well, two things. People rely on the machine learning technology to be right.
We knew that was going to happen.
I literally put it in quotes. I guess the computer got it wrong. And it's like, yes, they're not infallible. And that is kind of the problem. If you put something on autopilot, you know, and most of the time it's right, then you're just going to keep going on autopilot, not paying attention. You're probably going to pick up a book and read and do something else. And that, I think, and I fear, even though we always say humans plus machines, everything's stronger, humans plus machines. These people, though, they're buying, a police officer has thousands of cases to solve. And he's going to put whatever he can to make these cases quickly, you know, to serve justice quickly. And most of the time, even though there's warnings, and in that particular case, there was a warning saying this is not an official document that you can actually go and arrest someone with. This is just an investigative lead to help you hone in on some suspects that we think might be of interest. Instead, though, they took that and ran with it completely. And we see the same things going on in hiring. When you have 1,000 jobs to fill and 10,000 applicants per job,
Yes.
Are you going to stop and look at everyone? Well, then why did you even get the AI or the machine learning capability in the first place?
Correct.
So you're going to take that recommendation. So it has to be on all of us who are in this digital ethics arena, all of us who are taking on professions that affect, you know, all of us as people and out in the world as citizens. We have to be very, very thoughtful about how we train these things, the data that we're using. We can't be sloppy. I just see there's a lot of sloppiness. There's a lot of not documenting anything, not getting consent,
Yes.
not worrying about people's privacy, not giving them access. I mean, if this poor guy, the only reason he even got out of that situation was because of his Instagram account. It just happened to stamp him at being at a certain place at a certain time, and I think,
It's amazing. And he was able to actually defend himself. Many others haven't.
right.
So we don't have the count of those that have been affected that way. We do know from years ago that parole decisions in certain prisons, certain federal prisons, being made by AI released people that they were not supposed to and did not release those who they were supposed to, and lawyers trying to ask questions can't get an answer because they just don't know how those algorithms really work. So I thank you for going through that explanation. This is so important for everybody to get engaged, but it brings me back to a good old plain governance issue, right?
Oh, and nobody wants to hear that.
No, but it's not an attractive.
There is not any real data governance that is going on within the, in my opinion, in the machine learning world. There is microcosms of
Yes.
small project-oriented data governance, which never has roots that anybody can go back and track, or traceability, like I was saying. And that all needs to change. And that's part of the changes that need to happen. And I want to leave on this note.
Sure.
So there's, you know, I am a person of faith. And in my mind, every day I come into my work at home office and I have my little postcard that's pinned up that reminds me why I got into AI ethics, why I left my role at IBM so that I could do this full time. And it is a Proverbs 31:8. Speak up for those who cannot speak for themselves, for the rights of all who are destitute. We are in a time when the average person does not know that these things can affect them the way that they are.
Yes, they do not.
And we have to stand up for people in every situation that we're in, whether that's that we ourselves need to step up and represent a group that is being excluded from the table, or whether we pull in people that need to be represented because their rights aren't sitting at the table when these discussions or these decisions about cash and no cash, or these decisions about which tribe should be doing what on what front, and who's determining who gets a loan and who doesn't and why. All of those things need all of us at the table. And so, you know, the main things I would say, and I've got my little list. this is not written out, so you can't see it, but I'll make it available to Paola. But we have to determine that the very first things that we need to do is determine the impact of the AI's initiative on people's lives. If it's a high impact, if it's a machine that's operating on someone and it could blow a hole in someone's chest, it's time to think about that.
Yes.
It's time to do a full-on committee, bring on every kind of color, shape, size thing, whatever we can bring that's diversified, and make sure we test it on all fronts. The second thing I would say is deal fairly with people's data and fully vet that information. Don't just let incorrect stuff go because you can't find the data to support what you need. A lot of what happens is a lot of proxies get put in. I would say the third thing is build in choice and transparency to everything. Let people see what you're doing so that you can reduce the bias that keeps happening. And then you're also getting vetted data directly from the people who will be affected, and you're getting feedback loops. You know, sometimes it's as simple as, hey, did you like this article on Medium that we just served up? You know, yes or no? Or, you know, kind of like the Spotify, yes or no? You like the song? Or, you know, just keep checking in with people so that they're not stuck with their label forever. You know, I don't want to be a persuadable forever. I want to be thought of as something more than that. Accountability. Take accountability in your own dealings with AI and encourage others to take accountability, and then enable it systemically if you are the person in charge. You know, make it a part of your agile methods. You know, if you're having a stakeholder readout, make it part of that to have an accountability factor. Does anybody see anything wrong here? Is there anything else that we need to think about? You know, instead of just going check, 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 it's time to, at every corner, think about the impact. And then finally, you know, if you're in charge of AI or machine learning, or you're funding it, or you're working with vendors that perform AI work for you, you have to develop an innovation plan, a responsible innovation plan of action. And that action should include, and I'll give you these, assessing the current state of how you do these things, of your operations, determine that target state and get the gaps down, decide on an ethical AI implementation strategy complete with the goals and the measurements. Right now, people talk a lot about principles, but they haven't put anything into action. There's been no actual moving forward with goals. And the only thing incented today is, when did you get it done, and did you get it done under budget? Not how did you get that done? Did you do anything, you know, that was sketchy? Did you go scrape that data off of some random website, or deal with a third-party vendor that was
public sets or anything?
Yeah, that was underhanded. I mean, how did you get that data, and how did you move this process forward? And did you test it with anybody along the way? Instead, we don't talk about the how. We only talk about the what and the when, and that's all that people are incented on. And as long as they get that, then they get their money and they move on to the next big challenge. So I think that would change a lot. And then just measure and communicate results. Communicate the results. I mean, when you have a quality product, people will know. If you took the time to go build something, a data set that was the right data set to use, not just a data set that's 98% white, 2% black, and 1%, you know, I'm out of my percentage, but anyway, you get what I'm saying. Then you'll always only get, for facial recognition, what a white face and white features are going to do. And then you come out with this latest thing where Obama's face came out white when it was trying to, did you see the upsampling?
Yes.
And they're like, why did this happen? I'm like, let's think about it. Even if the 2% of people that you had were like the most fantastic, wonderful people on the planet, that's not a statistically significant enough sample that it's going to, you know, data only cares about majorities. And so if you only train on majorities, then that's what you'll always get. So you have to really think about it from many different lenses. So that's fantastic. That's a lot. So I will leave you with these.
You're coming back for sure. But I'd like to wrap it up with a couple of concepts and reminders that you've already mentioned. So data does indeed only care about the majority. And the testing, the sampling out there is not enough. I have witnessed sampling that's just too little. If it were in a different industry, they would be horrified. And yet this is so impactful in so many ways. And bring us back also the last thought to have you comment on is the economy of trust. So more and more we see in history that despite advances and failures, people still understand whether they can trust something or not. So how can we incentivize the community of AI and the consumers of AI in a way that they understand that no matter what, that faithfulness of the decision, of the transaction, of the ultimate result has to be there. Otherwise, if we can't trust it, then unless somebody is controlling it, which is a nefarious purpose, we can't use it. So going down that rail that can be monetized, but at least bring in more accuracy, I think might be a bridge that we can leverage.
It comes back down to the underpinnings.
That's right. Yes.
If you can't provide transparency, if you keep everything in the dark and don't give anybody access to it and just say, trust me, it's great, it's going to be great, you'll never get there. You'll never get the economy of trust going. And we've actually seen the financial repercussions of this for AI because, you know, a lot of AI projects never meet the light of day. They just stay within that little project team. And it's because they haven't done these things, the documentation and the traceability and, you know, show me, what did you put into this, you know, mythical thing, this magical algorithm, you know. And just tell me about your accuracy ratings. That's the other thing I cannot stand to hear. I have 98% accuracy. Oh, really? No, I'm sorry, but accuracy of baloney is still baloney. So, you know, it's like you based it on baloney information, and now you're telling me you can accurately predict this baloney information. Thank you. That's not helpful.
Cortnie, you're a pleasure. You're coming back for sure. And we want to thank you formally. Please, for those of us listening, go to aitruth.org.
Yes, thank you.
And follow her. And you follow some interesting people as well.
I do. I try to put their words out as much as I can and help put our words out. Please help amplify the words because that's what I'm trying to do is get the message out.
And thank you for what you do for the body of Christ, and thank you for being humble and being approachable and having so much knowledge.
Thank you.
Please come back.